Put your hands together one time. I want you to get together. I want you to get together.
Brief introduction. Hello everyone and welcome to another Theorist to Theorist episode. It's been a while since I've done one of these, and today I have a special guest, Gary Wayne, the author of the book The Genesis 6 Conspiracy: How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Humankind. And Gary, you're a man who really doesn't need any introduction in this conspiracy world that we're involved with. You've obviously been all over YouTube doing many interviews with lots of people, and it's always fascinating to hear the things you have to say. So hello Gary, go ahead, introduce yourself, and yeah, what I really would like to know is how did you get into this first of all, and what's this book about?
Well, so happy to be here with you to discuss my book and some of the topics that I think that we're going to get into. And so, as you mentioned, my book is called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy: How the Descendants of Giants and Secret Societies Plan to Enslave Humankind, which in itself is a bit of a sort of a controversial title. And so it's a very good question as to how or why would somebody want to get into this. And so it wasn't really my intent to get this deep into it. In fact, it was my intent to just write a book of prophecy. I'm a Christian contrarian, and I would like to, and I want to get information out there that sort of clarifies things with what's written in the Bible and what the prophecies for the end times are all about and what they're predicting. And so I thought I'd cut my teeth on what I thought would be a very short book. So I wanted to connect what was going on in Genesis 6 with the sons of God going to human females and creating giants, and why giants show up after the flood, and what they have to do with end-time prophecy. And I just wanted to connect all of that together and do a short book and try and get published and set that up for other books. But somewhere along the road to the Colosseum, so to speak, things changed, because as I started to write the book, writing the first 10 chapters came pretty fast on a broad outline, but as I did more research, I found more and more doors to open, and so all of a sudden it went from 10 chapters to almost 100 chapters, and I could have continued to write indefinitely because there's just so much information out there and so many dots to connect. And so that's how I got involved on this. And, I find the whole area absolutely fascinating in terms of what happened in prehistory and sort of those ripples and reflections that we see today. And again, a lot of that is what the book is about, and a lot of that is what I post on Facebook and do interviews about.
That's right. Well, I follow you on Facebook, and you post some fascinating things almost on a daily basis. And what you did recently about Shakespeare as well was fascinating, and the relation to Francis Bacon, was it, I believe?
Well, yeah, and not only with who Shakespeare was, and there's a lot of people out there with a lot of different theories on that, and who and how powerful Bacon was and his connection to secret societies in New Atlantis. But the thing that's really interesting about what Shakespeare does as well with all of his plays, whether or not he's Bacon or he's somebody else or he's legitimately Shakespeare, whatever your perspective is on that, is this was a very well-educated individual who was part of the Spear Shaker Society that was helping to develop the English language. And within his writings, he has knowledge of prehistory. He has knowledge of gods, and he has knowledge of things that are just sort of unattributable to the son of a butcher. But he also gets into the occult side of it. Not that what I just talked about wasn't occultic, but there are more occult things in Shakespeare than people would look at, at first glance. Everything from fairies and references to giants like in Titania. King Oberon is king of the fairies out of Midsummer's Night Dream. So they have fates, they have fairies, they have genealogies, and they even have jesters and fools, Othello in Winter's Tale, that all are occultic in nature and unaccounted for his education level. But he has become like an icon of literature, and for good reasons, because it's very, very, very good literature, but it's also encoded with secret society symbols and emblems and genealogies and history and things in the occult realm like the Faeries, for example, or jesters.
Well, of course, reading your book and researching the Nephilim myself, and many people listening will understand that the Nephilim are awash in our culture and society since the very beginning, whether we know it or not. So, you know, to find that someone so heavily steeped in the occult, like Shakespeare, let's say, is talking about the Nephilim and demons in subtle ways, is hardly surprising when you realise just how all-pervasive this Genesis 6 conspiracy, I'll call it, really is in human history and the arts itself. And of course, that's just one tiny thing that you write about on your Facebook on a daily basis. And anyone listening, go check out and follow Gary on Facebook, because it's just brilliant, fascinating, interesting little tidbits, which obviously many people don't think about on a daily basis. Now, obviously, Gary, earlier you were saying, you know, this started off as a small project, writing a few chapters here and there, you know, creating a blog that became a small book. But the Genesis 6 conspiracy is an 800-page tome, from what I can tell. And I am only halfway through myself, up to the Atlantis, rise of the Atlantis and its permeation through history as well. So yeah, I can imagine this has been a long project which you just couldn't help but get sucked into, because it's a topic even I just couldn't help but get sucked into as you know, predominantly a scattershot conspiracy theorist. Coming at this from
such a large topic.
Exactly.
Well, such a large topic as well.
I came it from the atheist perspective, you see, and it led me to basically learning about the Nephilim answered a lot of questions and issues I had with Christianity. And obviously things like the flood of Noah, which is usually a huge boundary for most people, well, the question gets answered very quickly once you add in the Nephilim into the equation. So yeah, on that topic, you know, let's get into the Nephilim origins. You're the expert, Gary. Let's start from the beginning and try and lay out as best we can. Where did they come from? What's their plan?
Yeah. So Genesis 6 is fairly clear in its outlaying of where the Nephilim came from. And in the King James Version that most people would be familiar with, it'll say something to the effect that, you know, the sons of God went to the daughters of men, or the daughters of humans, and procreated and married them and created the giants. And in the King James Version Bible, if you take giant back to the original Hebrew, it says Nephilim, or a tribe of giants. And so they were known as the Nephilim. And so these giants also show up in Numbers 13, where again, if you link that back, it says in Numbers 13 twice, Anak were descendants of giants. That goes again back to the Nephilim. And so again, you have the same definition for that application. And so these were offspring of angels and human females, and were given significant sort of genitive traits that were greater than the average human. One would be size and strength, both in width and in height, and also in looks and other capabilities. And these weren't just sort of, let's say, gangly, tall, uncoordinated beings. These were muscular, you know, WWF wrestler type, or football player type, or, you know, bodybuilding muscleman type. They were where the average height to width ratio of a human would be 3 to 1. It's 2 to 1 on what these giants were. And depending on who you talk to, they were either 20 to 40 feet high, and depending on how you want to translate the book of Enoch, which I don't totally rely on because it's a bit apocryphal and has a couple different translations. It was 300 ells or 300 cubits, depending on which translation you're using. And we're not sure what that measurement of an L actually was, but if it was a cubit, then that would put them like 400 to 500 feet high. So I think that's a corruption in that apocryphal book. But they were, as they're talked about in Amos, as tall as the cedars of Lebanon, which were as high as 35 to 40 feet tall. So somewhere in that range probably would have been the original ones, and they were fleet of foot and very dexterous. So these were the same beings that are talked about in all other cultures around the world. So it's not just a Bible narrative. It's a story that's told in all the ancient cultures around the world, in their religions and in their mythologies and their legends. And so you might know them as titans in the Greek legends and mythologies. And the classic example of that is Atlantis, which you had mentioned earlier, the chapter that you're on in my book. And Poseidon is a god of the gods of Mount Olympus, and is the sort of second set of gods that are created in this world from Kronos and Rhea, and as being sort of the parent gods to the Olympian gods. And Poseidon is the god of the sea who marries a human female, just as in Genesis 6, and her name is Clymene, and several other names in different transliterations and legends. And as Plato writes, he has 5 sets of twins, and these are titans, and they become the kings of the Atlantean Empire. And they have the same story as what's going on in Genesis 6. We also might know them as giants known as Anunnaki in the Sumerian history, where again they have the same sort of creation and are giants and are the ring lords and the kings of the Sumerian society, or they'll be called the Tia of India, or the Zuras, or the Zabelba of the Kishamaya, or perhaps the Tengu of the Japanese, and the Myosi of the Chinese. But they're all talking about these giants, and they all have a similar creation, and they all have a basic sort of coming to an end through rebelling against the gods and becoming corrupt and being wiped out by a flood.
So I guess it seems to me like pride got the better of them as time went on. I mean, I'm curious to know what made them think they could appoint themselves as kings of the earth and leaders. Do you have an answer for that?
Well, they were, if you get into the various mythologies, and I think in this case, the Sumerian one is the most clear, where at Nippur, which is also a mountain, similar to Olympus or Mount Hermon. But this is where heaven met earth with the gods. And this is where the kings or the ring lords were appointed kings. So they were not only the offspring of the gods, but they were also, or fallen angels as we know them in Christianity, but they were also appointed with the divine right to rule by the gods. And they were the intermediary between the gods, along with the priesthood that were set along beside them, and the rulers of the various empires of the antediluvian or pre-flood world. And so their divine right was issued from the gods, and that's how they assumed their right to rule. But because of their size, because of their strength compared to the average human, I mean, they easily were able to usurp the kingships and the governments of the antediluvian epoch. And then when they show up again after the flood, and just as it says in the Sumerian legends and mythology, they usurp the kingships after the flood and create the royal dynasties as they come down through history.
Right. Well, it's fascinating stuff, isn't it? Well, I think there is a huge distinction and difference to be made, I think, between the pre-flood and post-flood Nephilim as well, because obviously there's arguments as to how that happened after the flood. The Epic of Gilgamesh, as I was reading your book, is a good example of other Nephilim surviving the flood story through prior warning from their father gods, the fallen angels, let's say. But
yes,
what was the distinct differences then between those pre and post flood Nephilim? What would you say was the main differences? Was it just looks or size alone, or was it something else?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. So however they survive, whether it's on an ark or with angelic or God help, or they're recreated after the flood with another incursion, what they don't have out of the gate is, or somehow on the ark is the other theory that some people have through the daughters or one of the members of the ark as being a giant. But what they don't have is they don't have that immortal spirit in them anymore. And in Genesis 6, God limits the life of humans and the offspring of the angels to 120 years. And it takes a few generations for that to take place with the great ages that they were living to. But after the flood, they don't have that immortal spirit. And as they continue to intermarry with humans so that they can reproduce and not have their bloodlines sort of corrupt into genetic defects, although they do try and keep their bloodlines as pure as possible, trying to find that balance. They start to lose that sort of look, and you start to lose that sort of size. So after the flood, if we want to look at a couple of giants where we get sizes from, you have King Og during the time of the Exodus, who somehow survives the flood by looking at what it says in the Bible in terms of whether or not it's in Deuteronomy or Joshua, as the last surviving of the Rephaim, and the Rephaim are a descendant of the Nephilim, as the Anakim are. And there's many giant names, whether it's Zanzibim or Abim, and on and on and on in the Bible, of different names of these people of the Middle East that were all giants and all known as Rephaim, that come from the Nephilim. He was sleeping in a bed, depending on whether or not you're using a royal cubit or a common cubit, because the common is 18 and the royal is 21, and one would presume if they were kings, as I make the case for in my book, probably use 21 inches for their measurement. He was sleeping on an iron bed for two reasons. One, it could hold the weight of the size of this individual, because wood would break from under the weight of Og. And it was somewhere between 15 and 16 feet tall, which would probably put Og somewhere between 13 to 14 feet tall. And then again, if you're using, it doesn't matter which cubit length, if you're using the length for Goliath, he even at about 1000 BC, which is now over 2,000 years after the creation of the Nephilim, he is either using a common cubit just under 9 feet tall, or just over 9 feet tall, and as big as about 10.5 feet tall. So they were shrinking in size by the comparatives that I've given. That the best information we have is that they were, before the flood, 20 to 40 feet. So they seem to be getting smaller as they go. And you can see dilution in the looks of them, because if you get into who produced them, they were the seraphim angels, and they are the fiery serpent angels of the angelic realm. And the giants that they produced look just like them. And that's why you have the serpent imagery in the antediluvian epoch, and you have dragons in the antediluvian epoch, because again, you put wings on a seraphim angel or a feathered serpent, you have a dragon, essentially. And so the Nephilim had viper faces, and they were described in some Gnostic Gospels as having long protruded chin that comes out a fair ways, and high cheekbones and slanted eyes and elongated skulls. And so if you look at, depending on the chronology that you want to use for history, whether it's 1200 BC or 1400 BC, have a look at King Akhenaten in the King Tut museums, or some pictures, or Google it, and you will see he still has that viper-like look that far after the original creation, and the intermarriages of diluting those bloodlines with human bloodlines down through time.
Yes, I saw the image of that, and was it Nefertiti as well, who has the elongated skull, like a bust, a sculpture of her head as well. I remember seeing the sculpture you're talking about, and it very, very sharp features is a good way to describe it. The Akhenaten statue as well. I agree. And obviously you mentioned serpents then, these angels that mated with humans. And I believe from your book, it was the lineage of Cain that they mated with. But I believe these serpent angels are a good example, like Quetzalcoatl in North America, let's say, which was a feathered serpent god of some kind. I am curious, why do they often depict them with human features as well as serpentine features? Were they multidimensional in the idea that they could appear as human but had a other form as a serpent of some kind? Because obviously when you look at Quetzalcoatl, you can see it's a serpent of some kind. There's usually a man within the serpent, kind of within the pattern designs of it. What do you think?
And you also see ones that are not just this serpent or dragon image. You also see within Native American mythology and religion of like the Thunderbird type of god, and you have again this eagle god out of Hindu religion that was the enemy of the Nagas, which were the serpent gods, and then you have the Anunnaki that are depicted as ravens or eagles, and so there seems to be a few different looks to these angels of prehistory. Just as in the Bible, you will also hear angels being described as, with Israel being saved in the Exodus on eagle's wings and will be again in the end time. So there's certainly a relationship between more than just the serpent imagery. And as you mentioned, you also have angels that seem to have the form of a human. So if you're in the biblical narrative about Lot and Abraham and Sodom and Gomorrah after the flood, they appear as humans. And there's also a Christian argument that says that angels aren't able to produce with humans because sex is not permitted, and therefore, the Genesis 6 sons of God weren't angels; they're sons of Seth. So there's an argument on a lot of sides in terms of how this can happen. But if you get into a biblical perspective that these sons of God were, as they're talked about in Job, 1 and Job 2 and Job 34, as the angels, and that they did procreate, because unless Genesis 6 is not the word of God from a Christian perspective, which I don't believe, then they were able to produce giants, which were something humans and humans combining couldn't produce. So we have this ability, where I'm going with this, to change their look, and they call that the shapeshifter doctrine, or the changeling doctrine, depending on where that's coming from, mostly from polytheist versions. But throughout the Bible, we have many different descriptions of how the angels look, and there are many different kinds of angels. But certainly they have an ability to take a physical form in this world. And the consensus, as you put everything together out there, is that they also have the ability to choose their sex. And so when we see different forms of God, whether or not they're in a serpent form, or they're in an eagle or a raven form, or they're in a human form, or they're in a lion form, these are all either different depictions of how what their order is in the heavenly realm, and or the ability to take whatever shape that they want in the physical realm.
Well, I think it's interesting as well, as obviously reading about the Atlantean idea, and was it Poseidon who was given leadership over the Atlantean Empire, as far as it was then, before the flood, of course. Was it, I think you mentioned that he started bull cults and the worshipping of bulls and idols and things like that. Is that correct? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, that would be the founding of the bull cult as well, and
so
or
it's just curious, because obviously Poseidon's always pictured as a fish-type god with a trident of some kind, but yet he's associated with the creation of bull cults as well. So that's the idea of an angel, mimicking two different types of animals related to him. So could it be that they could take any form? Yeah.
Well, and again, you see some of these images of these gods in a bull form, and is that a shape that they also took in their shape-shifting form, or is that representing their strength and their virility, and or is it because it's the age of Taurus that bull cult gets established, or is it a combination of all of the above? And it probably is a combination of everything that I mentioned. But yet you do certainly get bull type of gods that are out there, whether or not it's further down the road with Moloch, or a Quinatar, or a Minotaur. Those are all sort of bull depictions, just as Horus is part of that bull cult and bull god, even though Osiris' father is a serpent god, right? So you have this intermixing of these allegories in those ancient religions.
That's right. Well, considering then that, the fathers of the Nephilim, these seraphim angels, clearly had animalistic / human chimera type features. So they were very psychedelic, trippy-looking monsters of sorts. I hear descriptions of angels having thousands of eyes all over their feet and body, and legs and things like this. So they clearly had some kind of awe-inspiring look about them. So could you imagine what their children, their offspring, would have looked like? And that's really what I want to get into today. What did the different types of Nephilim, when they were all over the earth, look like? And what stories can we tell about this? What allegories have we got to tell?
Yeah, so if we get by the sort of standard one that we see, that is the most common and sort of crosses, all cultures, that is, which is the serpent look. We get into some significant other types of beings, and one that most people don't talk a whole bunch about is there is the lion men of many cultures that believe were fathered by a god named Ariel, which is the lion of God. And this is also very similar to the chimera coming out of Greek mythology that had the body and the head of a lion, and a goat head on its back and a serpent's tail, and it breathed fire. And then you have like King Habada of the Epic of Gilgamesh that Enkidu actually kills, and he had the face and the paws of a lion, and bull horns and vulture claws, and covered in scales, and tails of a phallus that looked like a serpent's head.
A full house.
And so you have many combinations that are going on, and I'm just touching on the chimera and the lion at this point in time. But I mean, you've got other things like Cyclops, and you've got the crab out of Sumeria, which are scorpion type beings that have an odd description of avian or bird feet and scorpion tails, and they shoot arrows, and these are the same ones that come out of the abyss seemingly in Revelation. And you've also got centaurs, which are a classic one out of Greek mythology, and you have those being created by the gods, and it's got a human sort of head on a body of a horse. And you've got mermaids that are part fish and part human, and you have trying to think all the different ones. You have the Cyclops, right? Or not the Cyclops, but you have already mentioned those.
And the Nagas.
You also have Pegasus, right?
Oh yeah, Pegasus, of course. I was thinking of the Nagas of India as well, the serpentine, half human, half serpent type beings. And I believe there was a story I heard. Clarify if I'm wrong. You may know this one more than me. That there was at this particular gulf in India, this sea, there was a mermaid type woman who would look, I think it was either during a full moon or an eclipse or something, would look like a perfect, beautiful human, and would lure men into the sea to mate with them, with the promise of gold, I believe it was. But most of the men drowned doing that. But after she had left, the sea or the shore would be lined with nuggets of gold of some kind, flakes of gold. Related to mating and spreading the human genome and the seed, the intermixing of these two races and everything. Have you heard that story?
Yeah, that intermixes with the siren mythologies and stuff. And sirens are also, depicted as these mermaid type individuals of the sea, and also thought to be in some others recantations to be the demons and the mothers of the original Nephilim, and that's part of their sort of punishment on this earth, to be part of deceiving humans and haunting humans through that sort of form. So, and again, and the Nagas, I mean, they also had a shape-shifting ability. They appeared as humans, and they also appeared as serpents, and particularly the cobra, as opposed to a regular snake, which would be sarpa. So they, the word Naga actually means cobra. So a specific type of Naga, and they also, as I mentioned, that eagle king that was their enemy. That was the Garuda in the Hindu and Eastern mysticism. So, all of these things tend to have a similar sort of history from all around the world, and they all sort of go back to the same sort. Just as the Nagas produced demigods, and they also produced with with human females, and creating various types of serpent type beings as well, not just any one. And of course, you get some very strange looking beings out of Eastern religions, like the elephant-headed god or being or hybrid, whatever you want to call it. Just an endless list of all of these strange beings that all seemingly have a relationship back to the gods or fallen angels, depending on your perspective, either manipulating DNA or procreating with other forms of animals on the earth to create these violations against creation.
Well, of course, fascinating that we can't also, something I've just got on my bullet point list here, fairies as well, and little Nephilim. They weren't all giants, were they? Could you expand on that a bit more, and that topic of Nephilim and where they may have come from?
Yeah, so I look at the little people that are part of the fairy culture, and there's 4 different classifications of fairies as being part of the same Nephilim story, and that these fairies were just another creation of beings in the antediluvian world. And they were, of course, let me just backpedal here just a second. Let me go back to the 4 classifications. So in the fairy religion and culture you have, or the fairy faith, you have the original fairies coming from off planet somewhere, led by a proud fairy or angel who rebelled. And so that's the first classification. And then you have a reproduction with humans, as in the Tuatha De Danann, and where that sort of springs from as another form of Nephilim, with these demigod giants. And then when you have the demigods dying, whether it's Nephilim or it's Tuatha De Danann, you create these shades or spirits or phantoms, which are these ghost type of beings, which is the 3rd classification of fairies. And then the 4th classification are the elementals. And within that classification, you have 3 other smaller classifications, one being, generically speaking, mischievous, like leprechauns and trickster type of elves. And then you have good-looking ones, and then you have ugly ones like gnomes and trolls and things like that. And then under each of those, you have many other subcategories. So you have a significant sort of nomenclature of names and beings that are associated to the little people that were also created by the gods, whether or not you go back into Greek history for the Nereids and other beings around the world. They are offspring, like the Nephilim of the gods, only they were a smaller being. And they have specific jobs. Like the gnomes, for example, would be the genealogists and the keepers and the protectors of the knowledge. Trolls would protect gates and bridges and things like that, or and some people think portals. And the female, a lot of the female fairies, like the ladies of the lake, they protect portals to the other world. And the dwarves, they were more smiths, and they made weapons and things. And this is sort of, and you see all of this come up in Ring of the Lords, and so much of that sort of polytheist version of the antediluvian history was just part of those beings. And so they served the Nephilim, and they served the priesthood, which is a significant part of the antediluvian epoch. So when you see wizards, as in Lord of the Rings or in the Atlantean mythology, or Merlin of King Arthur, this is representing as an allegory the bull cult or the polytheist religion of the gods, and partnering with the Nephilim kings to set up that governmental organizational structure. So each of the Nephilim reported to a particular god or a set of gods, and they also had a priesthood that worked with them to control the people and also work with the gods.
Well, you mentioned long-bearded wizards. I remember reading your book about Atlantis, and they were the class of people who were living in Atlantis at the time. They all practically looked like that. They aged brilliantly, and they were wise. And they knew a lot about everything. The 7 sacred sciences passed down, the secret knowledge, passed over.
Yes.
And obviously, it was you could describe it as a golden age. Many people have, a time where there was no pain, no suffering, and just time to follow every man's desires and thoughts to their end with no consequences, essentially. And that was essentially their downfall. And this wizard class, it's I believe after the flood. I don't want to butcher this, so sorry, but if I do, but I believe was it the knowledge of that Enoch had proliferated throughout the peoples of Cain's progeny. He preserved the knowledge during the flood by putting it in hieroglyphs onto pillars, and those pillars were then found after the flood, and the priesthood and the knowledge continued through, from Atlantis through to the age we have today, post-flood.
It's essentially correct. And in that version, it's Enoch not only, and it's actually, and then the Masons have two stories. One, Enoch makes the pillars, and one, some of his descendants and his children, Lamech and Tubal-Cain and such, were making these pillars that would put the knowledge on, and the location of Enoch's 36,525 books stored in 9 vaults stacked one on top of each other below the pyramids. This ancient knowledge is also known as the Pearls of Wisdom and other allegories. It's the treasure at the end of the fairy rainbow. It is knowledge. It is the emerald tablet. It is the Shatia. It is the golden apples. It is all of this ancient treasure is ancient knowledge that is saved and is reproduced after the flood, and is found by Hermes in this case, according to the Masons, and accounts for all of this sudden knowledge to build Babel and Babel City and the rebellion that's going on with Nimrod. And out of that, you have 2 major religions being developed after Babel. One is the Mesopotamian religion, where the Magi come from, which are the wise ones, and the astrologers, which are the wizards. And of course, the priesthood of Egypt, where Hermes goes with Mizraim and Ham to establish the Egyptian civilization after Babel. And it's a parallel religion with it all has the same source at Babel, which came from the antediluvian epoch, which is the Atlantean religion of astrology and pantheon of gods and magic, and same thing is being set up after the flood with similar types of looks. Because you can imagine an image today that we have of a magician or a magi is very similar to a wizard. That is not coincidence.
Well, essentially, Enoch was the first wizard. Nimrod was the second open wizard, or leader at least, of wizards. And I guess Freemasons consider themselves the modern day versions of wizards, holding this knowledge, or the knowledge they believe is passed down.
Sure.
And 2 pillars is an obvious symbol within Freemasonry, Jachin and Boaz.
Yes.
So
yes.
Obviously,
and that
expand if you could.
Yeah, Joachim and Boaz is sort of a lower allegory of the 2 pillars, and as you get to the adept level, you understand those are the pillars of Enoch or the pillars of Lamech in their legends, and you're passing through those pillars as you're climbing up these stairs into the different degrees of knowledge. And so that's what that sort of really stands for. And Nimrod, he isn't really the wizard here, but I'm going to come back to that just in a second, but I want to connect the word craft. So if you're in secret societies and the Masonic order, you're in the craft. And so this is related to, obviously, witchcraft, which is the Druidic religion, which is, again, completely related. And, today and over the last several hundred years, many of the Masons are also witches. They went sort of back and forth because it's the same religion and the same belief system. And if we look at who Nimrod was, he was the son of Cush in the Bible, but he somehow rebels and becomes like a Gibram, which is very much related to a Nephilim, at least as in terms of a tyrant, and perhaps even changes somehow, perhaps even with this knowledge. But there's nothing definitive there other than we know that he rebels. And the Masons now claim him as the first Grand Master of Masonry after the flood. And he writes the first constitution and starts to utilize the 7 sacred sciences with the building of Babel City and Babel Tower, and again doing that to honor the gods as they did in the past. And Hermes fits in because he finds this knowledge, brings it back, partners with Nimrod, and of course Hermes now is the priesthood just as he is considered a religious figure of polytheism as it comes down through either Greek or Egyptian or Mesopotamian mythology and religions and history. And this is the same organizational structure again that you have being set up, that was set up before the flood, where you have a Nephilim type of giant and a polytheist wizardry type of religion, or a polytheist religion, and reporting to a set of gods. Now, after Nimrod and Babel, I must say that Nimrod will marry into the giants, whether or not he was a giant at that time or not, which is up for a lot of debate. Because again, the giants usurped the kingships after the flood again. So very shortly after Babel, there's a taking over of the royal dynasties, but Nimrod certainly marries in with the giants.
Right. So on Hermes, could you just describe more about him and who he was? Just for my own, I'm interested in that. If you could just expand on that a bit more.
Well, he has a few different sort of histories, and there's three sort of different versions of it that kind of come together. And people may understand it as 3 times Hermes, or the Trismegistus. If I butchered that, I'm sorry. We struggle with that one.
Trismegistus, is that it?
Yeah,
something like that.
And
okay.
Yeah. So as it goes back, you have a Hermes that is a godlike figure in prehistory, and that's very similar to, let's say, the Thoth god of wisdom out of the Egyptian pantheon, who teaches and forms a priesthood. And this is called, the SEPT, the followers of Horus, the companions of Horus, the SEPT, the 7 sages. The Naga priesthood, it's that same sort of ideology that's going on here, where the gods will create this priesthood of bloodlines, which are kind of like another religious bloodline as opposed to a military bloodline that the Nephilim are, to house the knowledge and to develop the knowledge. So that a god who produces that sort of priesthood. The next one is that he was Enoch, son of Cain, in many of the histories as it takes back to it. So it's an individual in the antediluvian epoch, whether or not he is human or he is demigod. He is at least got some human sort of nature to him. And this again is starting to represent that religious bloodline as what Enoch does and what his progeny does down through Tubal Cain, who is also considered the prized artificer of metals in the Masonic belief system. And then you have a couple of individuals after the flood, one being Hermes, that's talked about at the time of Nimrod, and begins the development of the 7 sacred sciences and polytheism again after the flood. And then another one that's later on that is related more to the development of alchemy in Egypt. But these are all combined into that thrice greatest Hermes. And so I think there's a couple of things going on. I think there is a specific god. I think there was Enoch, and I think there was somebody after the flood. So I think there was 3, and it's all been sort of enfolded into one sort of ongoing mythos.
Perhaps it's like a spirit of Hermes that goes on through generations and throughout time, and usually embodies this priestly class who harbors the sacred knowledge for their own gains and purposes.
And that spirit of that is so fundamental and constitutive to their belief system.
Right, I see. Fascinating. Obviously, we went on a bit of a tangent there, but I have a look at me taking notes. Back onto Faeries very quickly here, just to sum up. You say that they're kind of a subservient class. They were kind of slaves to the Nephilim themselves. So obviously all the Nephilim didn't get on all the time happy and lovey-dovey like brothers and sisters. There was a strict pecking order with these people. And these lower, smaller, weaker Nephilim seem to have quite menial tasks of, like I said, guarding gates and bridges and, like I said...
Portals.
Yeah, portals, So basically, they were just the guards. They didn't have to think much in what they did. I've heard stories, of I'm not sure. I think it was around the Philippines or Indonesia, perhaps. I could be off there, but in that general area of the world, there's a story of a tribe who had to deal with very small, big-mouthed, red-haired, blue-skinned things that were cannibalistic and actually stealing children from the villages and eating them, babies specifically, and also they were luring women into the forests, raping them and then sending them back out pregnant, back into the village. So the people made a deal with them and said, look, we'll give you food on a regular basis if you stop eating our babies, and they agreed. And then, sadly, very quickly, they broke the deal, stole another baby, and this tribe went to war with them and completely wiped them all out. And that's kind of their oral tradition to spread that story. I don't know if you've heard it or not, but that's something I've heard before.
Yeah, those are very, very similar stories, and some of them are called forest people.
Mm-hmm.
The little people is, again, one of those things, whether it's pyramids or it's giants or this polytheist religion or it's serpents or it's dragons, they're in every culture all over the world. And they somehow seem to survive the flood. And in one of the classifications I mentioned, under the gnome classification, where, they're involved genealogies and knowledge, they're also involved with antediluvian technology.
Right.
And so in out of kind of your neck of the woods or island, I mean, there is a tradition of fairy abductions, and they come through fairy shays or fairy mounds, and they have flying machines and great technology, and they kidnap people for a fortnight. And actually include one of these fairy abductions in my book as you get further into it. And the description is identical to what we would know as a gray alien today. And of course, they're doing the same things.
Yes, I was going to mention that. I have alien greys, and I was going to ask you where do they fit into this, Gary? You've read my mind. Can you?
Yeah, and so again, in the alien mythos, there's many different kinds of aliens, and I've described one, which would be like the grey neighbours that they would be called in Scotland, for example, as I recall. And so this is one classification that have flying machines that come through portals, whether or not they're under the waters, that are guarded by fairies, fairy women, as I mentioned, and are sort of kept alive in stories like King Arthur, or the fairy shays or the fairy mounds or fairy dolmens, because dolmen means portal. And these are sort of mini Stonehenge buildings all around the world. And you can Google dolmen, D-O-L-M-E-N, fairy dolmen, and then you can see pictures of these or all over the internet. And so what I think is that they are definitely one aspect of the alien mythos, and it's also why they're kept alive in so many other non-Christian sort of literature and things, and whether or not it's in Shakespeare or it's in the Ring of the Lord, it's because these were beings that were in the antediluvian epoch, and again, somehow they survived the world, either off-world, underground, with God's help, or with technology. When I say gods, I meant small g gods, plural, to survive the flood. But you also have serpent-type individuals, right? You have the lizard people. And again, is this some sort of, but they're not giants, right? They're just, reptilians. And again, is this somehow the gods or the fallen angels saved some of the original serpents that were in Eden before their fall? Because we understand that these serpents were a very intelligent being, and in Genesis, they're a crafty, intelligent animal. It could speak, and in other accounts, out of Gnosticism, for example, they're as big as a camel, and they could do all the work for humans. And they were, before humans were created, they were sort of the king of the beasts. And so they're lured into bringing down Eve through eating, and with the help of Satan, to eat from the apple. And then you have the wings and the limbs and the feet taken away from this being, and it becomes the snake that is slimy and crawls on the ground that we know before. Before that, it's very much like the reptilians in the alien mythos. So again, were some of those actually saved, or are they just sort of part of an ongoing mythos? Because again, it's hard to prove that there are actually aliens, even though there's so much going on. But this is a very wide group of beings in this sort of alien mythos. And you also have angels, fallen angels, not angels, but fallen angels and demons as being part of this mix of this alien mythos. So there's different levels of these aliens. And from a Christian perspective, and I'll write a little bit about the book, I expect this is going to be part of the end time deception. And that it would not surprise me that there are these actual beings that somehow survive, just like other Nephilim survived after the flood.
No, yeah, I agree. When it comes to aliens, reptilians are a common reoccurring theme. You can't talk about aliens without talking about reptilian shapeshifters. That's a huge topic in the conspiracy world as well. And obviously, I've always seen in many, many films and references, there's a film called Midnight Meat Train, which is quite dark, which is specifically about reptilians living underneath cities in their own tunneled systems, in which people have made a deal to sacrifice or give them food in order for them to not come to the surface and, take everybody out. That's obviously quite a Hollywood dramatized version of the same topic, but the idea that they're subterranean means they could have easily survived a flood, let's say. And obviously when it comes to alien greys, as we call them today in modern day era, if they are just fairies of the past, they would have had spaceships and crafts made of light like we see them often today in UFO sightings, probably back then as well, so it would have been easy for them to just ride it out in the sky, But whether or not they are, what if they're allowed to survive, if this is God doing it, I couldn't say one way or the other. Obviously the evidence is there that they've been there throughout history as well. Yeah, fascinating subject. Obviously I am inclined, like most researchers in conspiracy, to believe that it's either demonic in nature when you see a UFO manifest today, because they seem to be related to light more than anything physical. It could be a fallen angel manifestation because they can be physical and non-physical.
Yeah, and they have the ability to shapeshift.
Exactly. It always seems like UFO sightings, I've seen a few myself, it's a shape-shifting light of some kind which seems to swim through the air like it's water, like a fish would.
Yeah.
So it's organic in some respect. It's a living organism in some way. Well, how come? Why they manifest? Whether they're physical or spiritual. Obviously, the Nephilim disembodied spirits are now demons. Are they coming back? I don't know.
Well, and it can be both, because if you get into Jude 1:6, it talks about these angels that reproduced with human females in Genesis 6, that they left their habitat, they left their place in heaven to do this, and that word is oikoterion in Greek, and that's a dwelling place for a spirit. Right. And then in 2 Corinthians 5, it talks about putting on the clothes, and the only other place where oikoterion comes up again in the Greek of this dwelling place for the spirit, where they're going to put on different clothes. And so it seems like they have an ability to be spirit in this world, or put on the clothes of the physical world in any sort of form that they want, in that changeling sort of doctrine that I talked about. And then, of course, demons are the bodiless spirits, as most have come to understand Nephilim, just as Jesus talks about demons in the New Testament, and the most famous one being Legion, that are afraid that he's going to send them to the abyss, right, with the other co-conspirators and worst of the demons before the time of the judgment. And so we know demons are real, and they have the ability to possess. And so there's a difference here. And as you get into different aspects of the occult to understand this, whether it's the alien mythos or the occult, it's that you have an avatar process and you have a possessing process, and they're a little bit different. So an avatar process is more, I think, implemented by a fallen angel, where it doesn't need a human body, but it can use them. But possession is generally done by demons, and all sorts of horrible, ugly things sort of manifest in the body. And they don't necessarily have complete control of the body, but it's not sort of this same understanding of what an avatar effect is. And again, that could be a different process of the different types of individuals, because demons are the bodiless spirits of the giants, and fallen angels are still very powerful beings.
Well, in terms of demons, it's a common subject on my channel anyway. It's something I like to study deeply. And I think it's understood, obviously, demons are persons without bodies, so the disembodied spirit of the Nephilim. To them, being without a body means they can't experience anything because they have no senses to experience the pleasures of this world with. So the concept is they'll live in your body as though it was a home of some kind, and many of them can.
Yes.
And vicariously live through your sin. They'll experience whatever you experience through your
absolutely.
senses.
And as they guide humanity in whatever forms of possession and contact that they have, and there are several, or many, they seem to be pushing us in a direction where we are going to either create clone bodies or transhumanism bodies or bionic things, so that they can actually have a body of their own. Because as you correctly stated, is that because they're not allowed into heaven, demons, and they're confined to the earth, and their original bodies died out, as I talked about in Genesis 6. Their bodies died, but their spirit wasn't permitted to go to sleep. And so they wander the earth, and the only way they can really participate in any sort of enjoyment, I suppose, at all, or sense of feeling, is to possess a body.
But possession is not always full control of the person. Like, they want to fully move them, and like a machine. It seems more passive. Like they'll live through you, nudge you, give you thoughts which aren't your own, in a sense, to make you do things which go against God, first of all, because that's the initial plan, isn't it? That's the conspiracy.
Yes.
But also just to sin in general, because when you say, drink or smoke or, whatever it is, whatever your vice is, that demon gets to experience that pleasure through you, because it's using your senses, like hooking itself in. But it very rarely takes full control of a person to dominate them. In most cases, it's when they're found out they start to do stuff like that, when they panic, I guess.
Yeah. And there's a tradition that sort of comes up around these bodiless spirits, and they're connected back to the demigods and to the Nephilim, is what we talked about. And we might recognize that, or people may recognize that as in hero worship that evolved in the Greek tradition, where the ancient hero, which is a titan, and again, a reflection and an allegory today used by superheroes, of these demigods whose bodies died, but their body didn't go to sleep. They would go back to their original realm or kingship or wherever they were from, and they would haunt the people. And they used to do rituals and sacrifices to appease this demon spirit and to leave them alone. This is also kept alive in ancient Taoism, which people know as Taoism today, so D to a T. And they were called vagabond ghost spirits, right? And again, they would protect their houses with charms and things like that to ward these spirits off of these ancient rulers. And so this is a worldwide understanding of where these demons come from and what they do. And again, clearly different than that avatar concept, which is also part of occultism.
Well, it's as though, to me, though the fallen angels may have lost their children, they've gained an army for the future, which is wreaking havoc today in the spiritual realm, So they've used it to their own advantage. Now they're using their own children to their agenda and advantage, which is quite disturbing in of its own right. The Nephilim, to me, is a sad story. They have no choice. What can they do? Other than to serve their masters now to the end, because they already know their fate is sealed, and it's kind of what they did. Is unforgivable. This isn't sympathy for the devil. I mean, these things were hideous, disgusting monsters that did some heinous things, and
they made their choices while they were still in the physical bodies of this world.
That's right. Yeah, of course. Well, you touched on transhumanism earlier, which is actually on my list of things to talk about today. And you obviously said they're going to try and create some kind of vessel, a clone body, be it a robot body of some kind, in order to house the Nephilim. So we're talking about from the beginning of Genesis 6 to modern day here, the conspiracy is still happening. And this is what, obviously, most people in the conspiracy culture are trying to tell people right now. And it's obviously to the secular mind, the atheistic mind, this sounds insane. But to me, the evidence is just overwhelming when you open your eyes and look at what is actually going on around us. So let's talk about transhumanism. Gary, do you have any ideas yourself on where that's going, and what do you feel about this? And obviously, you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, I think transhumanism is again part of that greater new man, as it was known in the 20th century with Nazism, or genetics. It is all part of that greater Nephilim concept, and it's twofold. One is for humans who are heavily invested in this, is to recreate immortality for humans, right? It's to bring back what the Nephilim had before God limited life to 120 years. And then the second thing is so it's about trying to create godhood in that polytheist religion in the physical world, as opposed to the spiritual world, creating gods in this world. And secondly, demons need a body, so they need humans to develop something for them to occupy that isn't going to be fighting against their occupation all of the time. So it's got to be done through either transhumanism, robots, or clones.
Yeah, a vessel which the Holy Spirit can't dwell in, essentially.
Yeah, it needs they need a dwelling place for the spirit, like a terrain.
That's right, and that's obviously what the agenda is today. You know, this is the conspiracy we're constantly really trying to reveal. The big thing around the corner, the mark of the beast, you know, along with CERN and the D-Wave computer, which seems to be like a glorified high-tech Ouija board. You know, the ability to communicate to and fro dimensions in this respect. So, what do you think?
CERN has a lot of occultic relationships, and there's a lot of speculation on it. It's also matched up with one of the, as I understand it, the 5 quantum computers in the world. And quantum computers is about interdimensional sort of options, right? So you have a computer that is able to work in different dimensions. Right. And it's odd that that's matched up with CERN. And then CERN, it comes from, there's 2 gods in mythology that have that name CERN. One is Cernunnos, which is a druidic god, and it's very much in that sort of Azazel, Baphomet, bull cult look is what his look was, and he was a fertility god, and very, very almost identical to the god in Etruscan mythology or religion that was actually called CERN. And all of these are pretty much identical with the Pan god. And so it's interesting that you have, and Pan is associated with Azazel, just as the descriptions are associated with Azazel, who is the leader of the Watchers, who created the Nephilim, who was put into the abyss. Right. And just as we talked about, is that you also have these crab beings that are also in the abyss that are going to come out in the end time. So one wonders whether or not they're trying to create the key to the abyss to unlock the impassioned fallen angels who procreated before the flood and perhaps also after the flood, like Azazel, and the worst of the demons that were also locked in the abyss, to open that up to bring on the end time. Because all of the imagery and the technology would suggest it's kind of pointing in that direction. Yeah,
it seems like they're intentionally trying to bring in the end times. I'll agree with that. And obviously, we talked about the key to the bottomless pit here, that what will come out are these, what do you call them?
A crab.
Crab. Is it just crab, is it?
Yeah, no, it's an ancient Sumerian name, and it is a ancient sort of Hebrew word for scorpion. Okay. And it's AQRAB, as I recall the spelling of it. Yeah, a crab. So and typically Q is pronounced K in those aspects, as opposed to how we pronounce Q. So
these obviously are going to be the things which are called to to hurt men for such a time, but not kill them. Is it these are these?
Yeah, because they have quite the descriptions to them, which are essentially a scorpion type of description, including scorpion tails, right, where they're going to sting people. And if you Google that, and there's some other different names for the Akrab in prehistory, in Sumerian. I don't have that name at the tip of my tongue right now, but if somebody wants to get a hold of me, I can dig that information up and look at it. I also have a post I did on it. These were the protectors of the gods, right? These were like the bodyguards of the gods.
Right.
And they come out and they're going to sting. And there's two types of scorpions that come out of Revelation 9. And one is more like an army, and the other one is more like a scorpion. And the one with the scorpion that stings humans, people will want to die, but they won't be able to die because of the stings.
Oh, well, I've heard a theory as well that they won't be able to die because by that point they would have taken a mark which gives them invincibility. So
yeah, no, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, I would say the mark has other attributes to it, but this happens well before the taking of the mark.
So this is like the first major event which kind of kickstarts the whole thing to begin with.
Yeah, it does.
I see. It also, is it not Apollyon or Apollo who rises from this pit as well, which is, would that be Azazel or linked to Azazel?
Well, yeah, so if you look at the name Apollo, it is also known in Greek as Apollyon, right, who is the destroyer. And Azazel is the destroyer of the antediluvian world and is the scapegoat who takes on the sins of the antediluvian world, as he's known in occult history.
Right.
And so I think Abaddon and Apollyon are likely the same individual. And this is the leader of these beings that are coming up out of the abyss.
Right. So CERN then, if Azazel or this Abaddon or Apollyon is the father of this Cernunnos or CERN, this child Nephilim CERN, which was worshipped as a god, are they naming the very thing they're going to try and do to open this portal as their own, like they are their children, we are the children of trying to release our father from the pit, essentially? Is that kind of an analogy maybe they're going for there? Just something off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think so. But also understand that the forces that are driving this technology, and if they are trying to create a portal to open up the abyss to bring on the end time, their belief system is a little bit different than what a Christian's or a secular belief system might be, or perspective on this. Everybody looks at like, who would want to bring on the end time? Well, these people want that rendezvous with destiny. They want that showdown to fight for their freedom. So they want to bring back their partners to bring on this end time, this showdown with the God of the universe, to try and win their own realm. And they believe they can win.
That's incredible hubris. That's pride beyond belief, isn't it? Well, obviously, I think many people who work for CERN as well may be ignorant too, and actually more have just an atheistic, scientific kind of mindset. And very productive people, so they just concentrate on their work and getting the job done rather than the morality behind whatever it is they're doing. So I think there's that to play as well, isn't there? But the leaders of this obviously symbolically have already spoken with their words and their names what they're actually trying to do here.
So how that breaks down is that if you're a fallen angel and you've already lost the rebellion before, and you know the omnipotent power of God, you know you can't win. Right? And if you're a demon who are the offspring, you're going to know the same thing, because now you've been trapped for a very long time. So all they're trying to do, and certainly when Jesus in 1 Peter, he goes into the grave, when he's in the grave at the time of the resurrection, he speaks with these individuals, and he's there to tell them that the rebellion's over. So all they're trying to do now is to mislead as many humans as possible to bring them down with them, because their fate's already been sealed with the rise of Christ. And so what is going on here is that they are deceiving humans to believe that they can win, and that they have to fight in this rebellion, just as you've got an interesting alien mythos allegory with Star Wars. You have the rebellion fighting against the dark lords of the universe, and that's the inverse sort of allegory of what we're talking about here, that humans are going to have to unite to win their freedom away from the suppressive God of the Bible and to become gods in this physical world.
Well, ideologically speaking, I think there is a rise in atheistic New Age socialism, I guess is one way of describing it. And the youth themselves are kind of going that way of ultimate rebellion against authority and cultural norms, and the hope to kind of break down everything that already exists for a more, down with traditionalism, more postmodernism. Let's deconstruct everything and break it down to nothingness and ultimate nihilism, essentially. And obviously, with a revealing of the Nephilim once more, I think that many people, especially my age, around 20 to 30, are kind of primed and ready to receive some kind of alien or something. It's anything bigger than themselves, let's say. And they aren't looking at it like a Christian looks at it. Like you said, they see it as finally something interesting is happening and they're going to save us from ourselves, not knowing we already have a savior who did that for us already, and this type of, again, the misleading of many. I see it happening, and obviously there's nothing we can do about this. It's prophecy. It's going to happen anyway, and the world is going to crumble away. I mean, do you have any opinions on this, or also some advice for people who struggle with these concepts? As someone who's had to think about this for a long time, Gary, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. And I have respect for people who have asked hard questions and have done research and have made an informed choice, whether it's a correct choice or an incorrect choice. They understood to make a choice and what they believe and what they're going to try and do about that. Trouble is most people don't do that. Most people are just they go along with the flow, and they don't ask these questions, and they're easily deceived. And I think my advice for people is that you have to ask hard questions, because there's so many superficial pieces of propaganda that once you get underneath it, you either find two things: A, it's meaningless, or B, there's something more going on. And unless you get there and continue to ask those questions, you're going to be easily misled. And in the end time, it's a specific generation that is predisposed to be easily deceived. And even the elect will be deceived if that were possible, and apparently it is. So we won't even be able to trust our spiritual leaders to a certain degree, because many of them are going to be deceived or are already part of the spurious forces as moles and are going to be trying to mislead us. So the propaganda and the brainwashing and the manipulation is huge. And the only way that you can break loose and wake up is you have to start to question things in a logical and critical way. And people think that that's what they're teaching people in university, but they don't. They're not teaching them to ask critical questions. They only ask critical questions with one specific bias.
Well, like I said, Gary, I mean, to accept the truth and concepts like this to most people in this world today is ludicrous and insane, as sad as that sounds. However, when you do just open your mind and drop biases and just observe the information for as it is, you can't really deny the existence of the things we're talking about. And I don't think many people are really willing to cross over. I think there's a lot of self-delusion and denial about some of these things as well, coming from a lot of people. I'm not sure how we can solve that problem, but I guess the gospel is doing a pretty good job. So I have faith more people will wake up as things ramp up. What do you have to say? What's your thoughts?
And I agree. I agree with that. And there's only so many people that are going to wake up. And that's so tragic. But everybody is here to make their choices. And the choices that are in front of this generation are huge. And I get brainwashing. I get what happens in school. I get what happens in the media. I understand all the literature and the entertainment is designed to overload you with occultism and a specific view of where they want you to go. And they're telling us in advance of what they're going to do and what's going to happen in these stories. So I understand all of that, and it is very, very tragic. And all we can do is try and communicate, A, from being a role model, and B, as clearly and without significant judgment or venom or anything that's sort of unchristian in a way that maybe they'll remember it. And when things start to happen even more, it'll trigger that memory and say, hey, something's not right here, and they begin to wake up.
Well, I said that's a good point. I said in the past recently on a podcast with Dazzling One, something along the lines of this, that I believe all this research we're doing now, which I've been doing for the past 5 years, and joining this culture online, which is all getting involved in learning these truths together. I think there may come a time when this gets taken away from us, and it may not be as easy for us to communicate these ideas as it is right now, because there's an agenda against the truth, sadly. So if perilous times do come, and let's say the electricity goes out and people have to revert back to a very basic form of living again, which they may not be prepared for, and so forth, it's people like us who have sounded crazy to them in the past in our immediate surroundings who talk about these things. They'll quickly come to us and say what's going on. I think they will remember that they said something like this was going to happen. Maybe they know what's going on. And I think all this time we've spent researching and learning about these deep concepts and sharing our ideas is just to prepare us to tell people when the time comes what the truth is. Because there won't be many people who know, and there'll be a lot of people looking for answers and terrified of what's actually going on around them. And if we can be there to calmly make sense of their situation and give them context to what's happening to them, hopefully it won't send them as insane and deluded and as evil as predicted, like all the movies have programmed people to be violent and vicious and every man for themselves. It doesn't have to be like that.
Won't be like that. I mean, the deception will be so good that people will choose in that direction because they are expecting utopia and godhood. Like, this isn't a bunch of people growing horns and stuff and becoming. They're actually thinking that they're the people of light, that they are the good ones, and those who oppose, which will be Christians and other monotheists, and certainly some other ones, are the evil ones, right? It's a complete role reversal. And I think that it's important to try and communicate as clearly as possible, but it's so difficult because once, and I'm sure as what you have found is that as you dig into this, it's unimaginable how big this conspiracy is, how far this reaches, how old it is, and into every aspect of what it reaches into, that even as a researcher, you kind of think sometimes it just can't be that big.
No, but I've had those moments. Honestly, I've had those moments, Gary. I think everyone listening has had these moments where I guess it's not doubt, because that which has been seen cannot be unseen. I can't unlearn a lot of some of the things I've understood about how the world works, So for me, it's as solid a worldview as I think I can possibly get it now. But you do have those moments where you think, this is getting ridiculous. It really goes that far. They actually can do these things, and wow, But the more and more you learn, that it's kind of the closer to truth, therefore God, I kind of feel. You know what I mean? Like I'm on a level here which is giving me a peace. It doesn't make me better than anybody, but a lot of people go through the motions when they first learn this truth. They get angry and go through the 5 stages, and usually ends in acceptance. I'm kind of past the acceptance stage now, and I'm at this peace stage where I understand. At least I feel like I at least understand what's going on around me now. Confusion has disappeared, and it's a very sense. It makes sense, this worldview, but it's hard to sell the worldview of conspiracy to people. And this is something I tried to tell at the beginning. Actually, it's what my channel was about. What I said was something. This is before I was saved, so maybe I was a bit vitriolic, but I kind of said, look, it's about chemtrails specifically. So I said, look, these people are right. It's really happening. They have the truth. They're just not very good at presenting it to people, and no one takes them seriously. And that was kind of my initial problem with the truther culture. Like, these people are bang on, but they put people off massively because of certain mannerisms and things they do.
Yes.
And I've tried to micromanage and tell this to people, and got involved with channel makers, and I think it's calmed down a bit now. But when people panic so much, and they have this truth, they just blurt it out in the most insane ways. So it is difficult. How can you communicate something so big? I've tried to figure it out, and I had an impasse. I can't do it. So maybe I'm not supposed to know it all and be able to say it all. I think we all do that together. That's kind of
well. I think we all do it together, but I would, suggest that people from out of the gate on this it's so big you can't explain it all in one sentence, let alone 1 hour or 2 hours.
No.
But if you are actively communicating this, what you want to be able to do is just have them come back and to read more about your work, or listen to you more on interviews, so that you invite them in to want to learn more, because what you are saying does make some sense, and you don't sound like a crazy person, and you don't sound like you're making things up, and that you base everything on proper research. And again, in my book, I put all of my sources there, so people can verify what I'm saying or not. So it has over 120 pages of endnotes in it. And so when you do that, you can extend the conversation, right? Because if I were to start off, and I'll give one example here, is that, when we talk about Enoch, son of Cain, as opposed to Enoch, son of Seth, he inherits the seven sacred sciences from Adam that was taught in Eden. But what he does now is he's going to pervert these sciences to create the mystical religions and secret societies to develop it, to do some certain goals, which would be to not honor God for anything, to develop these sciences in a way God doesn't want you to develop it, and to lead people away from God. And now say that is what the Royal Society was created to do, because they're created by Freemasons and Rosicrucians, who are all part of this ancient belief system. And that's exactly what science does today. And also to honor was the fourth thing, to honor the pantheon of the gods, and to build things in honor of the gods, and to do things. That's exactly what science says today. But if you just go from A to B like that, you're going to sound like a madman.
Of course. Well, I've learned this because the idea was that how do I give an elevator pitch for conspiracy and the truth? Like a quick, if I had 30 seconds to explain it to somebody, how could I do that? And it's just, it's impossible. You've just mentioned something there, of course, which is a very important part of the puzzle. But the context to understand what any of that meant, it takes years of research and reading to know who these groups are you're talking about, and why they would have certain intentions and what they believe. And context is something many people lack with something that's been hidden. They don't call it the occult for nothing. So yeah, deep stuff. And I think we've been going for an hour and 25 minutes, and I have a few things I have to talk with you about, Gary. And it's about the jesters and clown connection. Something and people who follow my channel will know about. It's a series I have going, where I've found archetypal similarities, symbolically speaking, for the clown, the westernized image of a clown, and even many Eastern versions of jesters and clowns are very reminiscent of descriptions of the Nephilim. Do you have any thoughts or input on that idea of the jester, the clown, the Venetian mask, let's say, and things like this? Where do you think that came from, that symbology?
Well, I think you're probably an expert in this area, and for me, it's kind of a off sort of shoot area, which I find fascinating. And but yeah, definitely, this whole clown, trickster, jester, joker, fool allegory is directly connected with prehistory and the religions that roll down through history, through magic and in other forms and rituals and occult rituals, and is part of that whole spurious system. And again, it is a global-wide phenomenon. It's not just a European one. It has a European flavor, but whether or not it is in let's say native North America, you have medicine men. You have shamans around the world. You have magi. These are all sort of similar orders, and all take their roots back to the same level. So I'm not sure quite where you'd like me to go with this, but what I will say is that when you look at theater masks or clown faces, you have some commonality here, and you have like these white background faces, whether it's the whole body or it's just the face, and some of them are very demonesque. This goes back to a reflection of the demon that's within, and whether or not that's a possession or it's an avatar, which is all, again, part of the spirit of the trickster, as it goes back into prehistory. This is a reflection for the most part, when you see the evil sort of clown sort of look of a demon, right? Or the mask that they have in Chinese theater. And in India, you have the same sort of look in some of the statues. And these are the bodiless spirits of the Nephilim, or the hero within. Just as we mentioned that hero worship, Nephilim were the heroes of old. They were the famous ones of renown. They're called heroes in Greek mythology because hero in the ancient understanding of the word hero isn't what we understand it today. It was understood as the offspring of a god and a human, a demigod. And these are the bodiless spirits of these heroes. So anyway, just a quick blush and decide where you want to go with it from that, because we can get into it in more detail. But you
mentioned briefly there about possession and how clowns are intimately related with the disembodied Nephilim, the demons who want to possess people and manifest in people's bodies. Now, I think a lot of magicians, obviously, it's known that they make deals with demons in order to gain power and give the illusion that they have the power, for usually sacrifice or some kind of ritual that has to be performed every month or something like that. And obviously, there's one particular type of magic in Japan, I think it is, which is face changing, and it shows people wearing incredibly psychedelic, multicolored garbs and clothing, wearing incredibly bizarre-looking masks, just multicolours of all patterns and shapes, and they would quickly, in a split second, just change the mask by flipping something in front of the face, like the hand. And they would do that over and over and over again and go through about 100 different designs. And it is impossible. But what I've noticed is that they are manifesting this fractaled maze, matrix-type otherworldly clothing, reptilian in nature, like serpent skin can be pearlescent and multicoloured, something to bear in mind there as well. And obviously, it seems like maybe they are representing the Nephilim in order to venerate the Nephilim, in order to gain power from the Nephilim to perform such a feat. But then there's also this thing that happened last year where people were dressing up as clowns and scaring the living daylights out of people, chasing them with knives, the creepy clown sightings of October 2016. And I found that such a bizarre thing. What would possess a person to do such a thing? And then it clicked. I think maybe what we were seeing there was a physical manifestation, albeit in a very crude way, of a clown costume, representing the very entity which is possessing such people to do such things. A true worship and veneration, I guess. Now, the reason I say Nephilim look like clowns is because the stereotype clown is a white skin, wild red hair, and with red around the mouth, like blood, so cannibalistic in nature, and a big bulbous red nose, which, if you go to festivals of Basel in Switzerland, every year they do a festival, and big-headed, pale-skinned, crazy-haired masks are put on people, which are huge, with big mouths and big bulbous red noses. So maybe, I think, the reason I'm asking you, Gary, is you know a lot about the Nephilim. What is with this pale skin and red haired Nephilim style? Is there a link there between that and the archetype clown?
Yeah, there is. And when you get into the details of what some of the Nephilim look like, other than the obvious facial features that we had talked about earlier, they were known to have very pale skin. And that's why, the Tuatha De Danann, as the fairy people, is a connection there from an allegorical perspective, because those are the fair folk and the fairy people. And they also had two sort of distinct sort of hair colors and eye colors as they go down throughout history, through whether or not they're the Aryans or the Tuatha De Danann, and both are related. So you have the red-haired and hazel-eyed noble Celt, which Dracula is basically based on.
Yeah.
And the drinking of blood is another notable Nephilim trait. And you also have the blonde-haired, blue-eyed ones. And so when you see giants that are being discovered with their bodies, even though their skeletons and things don't tend to last that long, you see certainly a number of them in North America and in Peru where they have this red hair. And if you get into Atlantean mythology, again, they'll describe both of those hair colors, or the ancient Kishamaya history. So that red hair is one of the significant descriptions, and the hazel eyes with the pale skin, one of the two types that sort of come down through prehistory.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, obviously, thanks for saying that. It just gives me more things to talk about in future videos. You know, about specific examples of them with red hair. I understand there was a very recent altercation between an Indian tribe who had to deal with red-haired giants. I think eating their children again, cannibalizing their tribe, and they smoked them out in the cave they lived. And I think bodies were found in there at a later date and removed by the Smithsonian, I think, or something like that. But that's a recent case of an altercation with Nephilim, which may still be here. And there's another popular one that came up recently about in the 90s in the Middle East, an army squad came across a giant which killed a few of them, and they managed to kill it and capture it. And that had red hair and pale skin too.
And so let's make a couple more connections to sort of underline that, because the modern clown is just sort of an evolving sort of picture of where all this sort of comes from.
Yeah, caricature is the word I use.
Caricature,
it's kind of a cartoon idea, isn't it?
As I mentioned, it's rooted in the trickster spirit of prehistory, and that's why it's related to jesters and jokers and fools and shamans and magicians. But I'm jumping forward there, but it's rooted in the spirit, which is of gods, demigods, and heroes, right? And as I talked about, they have a spirit that's within them in this occult sort of nature. So they're either being possessed or they're avatar, and they were all tricksters and shapeshifters and or monsters and givers of knowledge, right? And creators of chaos. Now, what's important about all of that is that when we look at these beings that are coming down, they are being represented in these sort of caricature looks as being part of that whole look that comes down out of prehistory. And as we connect that back to the two different colors of hair, and you don't see much for the blonde hair for some reason, but go back into, let's say, Norse prehistory, and you have the Asgard gods, and amongst that one god is a particular one called Loki, and Loki is a giant from Jutland, and he's included amongst the Asgard gods, and he is a trickster god, and he is a shapeshifter, and you've got these shapeshifter gods and trickster gods all over the world, and some of them include Hermes and some of that as that sort of god, as one of those aspects of them. Prometheus, Set, and Long, Vela, Anrita, Lug. We talked about feathered serpents, that they're all sort of related in this aspect. And it's also interesting, just connect. I love to connect dots. Is Loki is the root sort of name for Luke Skywalker, because Loki was known as Loki Skywalker.
Interesting.
And again, you get that alien mythos that's sort of mixing in there. So a lot of the names in entertainment come out of prehistory. But this trickster spirit has the ability to connect portals, because these sacred clowns, as they're known as in the sort of the shaman or the religious or the magi aspect of, are in continual contact and talking with these demons, and whether they're possessing them or they're just communicating with them, and it can open portals to chaos and before creation. And again, when we talk about CERN, or we talk about portals and all the different reaches where portals go through, fairy mythology, alien mythology, and now all of a sudden we look at these clowns as being these religious leaders, as shamans that go back to this religion of Enoch and Atlantis in the antediluvian epoch. All of a sudden you just start to go, oh my God, how far does this reach?
Well, if you go through all ancient tribes from spanning from the China, Australia, Aborigines, all African tribes, North American, South American tribes, the Druids and things like this, they all have a jester archetype character within their gods, and that the people would do rituals, dress up as. And they were always very bizarre-looking, psychedelic, clownish-like creatures. Very similar. They're usually black and white is a common motif across all of them. Having two horns, which are wobbly, and furry, bushy skin, or like some of them are just balls of hair. It looks like, and that's a very common theme as well.
Again, another significant connection to Nephilim is they were known as being very hairy beings.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. And another thing which I found, this is something I've kind of connected, is if you consider a carnival or a fun fair as this place where there's a big wheel of light spinning constantly, and there's many lights flashing and multicolored bulbs going off all over the place, and it is the natural habitat of the clown, physically speaking. So symbolically speaking, does that represent the kind of world they're in as spiritless bodiless spirits? You know, the fractal psychedelic realm people experience on ayahuasca, you know, or on DMT, let's say. And it's regularly reported by secularists, people who don't have a clue anything about this, that they see jesters when they take these consciousness transferring drugs. Jesters are common, and they usually mess with them, attack them, swear at them, joke with them, you know, tell them lies, tell them all sorts of things, contradict themselves, joke, dance and laugh around whoever's in that realm for the 10 minutes they're there, you know. And these commonalities of the carnival, you know, this place where there's a giant wheel, the portal spinning, if you put it on a time lapse, you know, it's a constant wheel of light. So if it's symbolic, I don't know if it's done on purpose, but it seems like some kind of it could be, or it could be the spiritual manifesting in the physical in some way. You know, this place.
They are always inundating us in every environment where that belief system is positioned with its allegories and symbolism.
So you think it's intentional then? Well, that's interesting. Yeah, it could be. You know, I do wonder sometimes what is spiritual in nature and what is really man-made. You know, and that's something which could be intentional, and I can see how it was done. Another thing which I do think is specifically designed and intentional is nothing against the homosexual community. You know, I love them all, and I want them all to be saved like everyone else. But the movement of gay pride, this idea of having a festival going through the streets, you see these, usually the people there dress in clownish, colourful, feathered, bright clothing with the rainbow flag going all over the place. Not dissimilar from the multicoloured pattern seen at a fun fair or a carnival. Which I believe, again, represents the realm within the Nephilim, you know, where they are disembodied right now, looking like jesters and clowns, you know, that's kind of probably their form right now. The psychedelic coloured clothing and patterns represent that, I think, like the diamond shape or the Harley Quinn pattern. But you see this Pride Festival, and obviously the Nephilim, where there's another word for proud, you know, they were very proud, over the top, self-loathing, narcissistic race of people. And then you apply, you know, a pride parade to these people who are dressing like clowns and jesters, you know, celebrating sin, as we would call it, in debauchery, walking naked through the streets where children can see them, involving children in this type of thing. You know, obviously I don't want to get on that now, you know, and go down that debate, but symbolically speaking, I see it again, the Nephilim manifesting themselves in the physical through people, you know, acting in such a way and dressing in such a way, just like people dressing up as creepy clowns to scare them. Why the clown? And why is it been released recently as well, coinciding with this? You know, is it symbolically saying the Nephilim are returning? Is that what it's all trying to say? Yeah.
Well, it seems to be in their belief system they have to tell us what they're going to do beforehand, and they keep their mythos and their religion and their beliefs alive continually, and in all sorts of aspects. And people don't know, just as you described about all of the imagery that's in the gay movement, that is all typical demon and Nephilim imagery. They just don't realize.
Well, it looks so beautiful, doesn't it? So colourful and so bright. Yeah. Like Lucifer poses as an angel of light, you know. No Marvel.
Yeah.
And again, Marvel magazine, you know, Marvel, which is about superheroes, which are modern day Nephilim, you know. Referencing that very quote that Lucifer poses as an angel of light. So it literally is all pervasive. We're getting into that idea again, aren't we? That how do you explain something so big so quickly? Because
it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And as you get into that superhero thing, I mean, those are definitely reflections of the Nephilim, and you know, and again, sort of connecting that with the clown thing and the history of the clowns. And you may have covered this, but I'll throw it out in case it hasn't been covered.
Oh, go ahead.
Is that, you know, as the gestures and the jokers are evolving through the Middle Ages, and they're trying to hide from the Catholic Inquisition and being called witches, and they're still being part of the court. They're still trying to keep the king reminded through humor of his fallibility and sinful nature, as they believe in their belief system. If for whatever reason they fell out of disfavor as a jester or joker of the royal court, they would be mutilated, and typically mutilated in the face. So now you roll that forward to Batman and the Joker, and not only does he have that Joker title, not only does he have the white face and the clown type face, he has the mutilated face as they roll this allegory forward. And of course, you know, Batman is just another superhero, and Gotham, it comes from Gotham. And as you go through the Batman series, it is absolutely inundated with an allegory that even associates New York City, or Gotham as they have it, with Sodom and Gomorrah. And I'll write my book, The Connections of Nephilim to Sodom and Gomorrah, not only just with homosexuality, but all sorts of sexual violations and other corruptions, and that they were involved there. They tell us their history over and over and over and over and over. People just don't recognize it.
Well, isn't that such a fascinating allegory with the Joker, though? The idea that the Joker falls out of grace with the king, the system of authority, and is mutilated and cast down into a pitiful state as a result. That is an allegory of the Nephilim, you know, who were given great power and abused it hideously, and were therefore stripped of their immortality and given a scar forever, essentially, you know. It's the same allegory, isn't it? Very fascinating.
It really is. It really is. And, you know, you take Superman not as a clown allegory, but Superman as is probably the best example of a Nephilim sort of overlay allegory. So Superman is obviously a superhero, right? And probably the most famous one. But what people don't understand is on his chest, he has this inverted pyramid that has this S that's in the form of a snake. And he is son of the house of El, and El being a god or an angel. And he is this superhuman being in the physical world that comes from another place. I mean,
so literally the serpentine offspring of a god,
named El. And El was the father of Baal, father of Molech.
Isn't it interesting how clever these people are doing this brainwashing? Because children watched Superman as a kid, you know, and thought all of this was original and new, and, you know, how did the creators come up with such amazing ideas? I want to be just like them, you know. And you realize these people who make these scripts, you know, and write these stories, really they're just hacks who are copying the ancient past word for word and passing it off as unique. You know, they aren't original in any sense of the word. You know, Ecclesiastes comes to mind, that there's no new thing under the sun in that respect. You know, it is what has been will be again, and here we are, you know, venerating the Nephilim on a daily basis, our children on a daily basis. You know, dressing up as their favorite superheroes, and it was really an testament to how dark and far this world has gone. You know.
And in case I didn't make it clear enough, I'll just double tap it here. So Superman is the son of a god, is son of God, right? As Nephilim was the son of a god.
That's right. Yeah. Are you still there, Gary? I think you may have cut off for a second.
No, I'm still here.
You're still there. Sorry, I wonder what's going on there. Yeah, no, I agree. Exactly. It's the exact allegory, isn't it, of a child being born of an angel, you know, but half human as well, having superpowers. I mean, that's something that's being sold with transhumanism as well, along with these superhero allegories today, like Superman. who doesn't want to be Superman? You know, what kid doesn't want to take that upgrade and have powers like Wolverine, you know, change your skeletons for metal or things like this. And right now, what seemed science fiction is becoming a reality, you know, on a daily basis. They already have the technology to edit genes at birth, you know, and choose your eye color, choose your hair color, choose your height, strength, your metabolism, whatever you want, basically. And obviously with the advancements of stem cells as well, which involves child sacrifice to get that power. That is a direct link to the antediluvian past of, you know, drinking the blood and sacrifice for power towards these gods, you know. We do it in a more sanitized, so we believe, type of way. Everything what has been has just been modernized, I guess is the best way to say it, isn't it? Modernized.
Yeah, we see a conversion of transhumanism into that greater Nephilim concept that I had, and that's why I don't always get caught in the antediluvian epoch to say whether or not it was DNA manipulation with a lot of these fabulous beings that were created, or, you know, continual sex with animals in this world to create these fabulous monsters. Because some of them had, you know, depictions of many different types of animals. So I think there was some DNA manipulation going on, and I can't leave that sort of unfinished by, you know, in case, you know, people aren't familiar with some of the things, some of my work and stuff, and some of the things that I say is that the technology in the antediluvian epoch was greater than what we have today. And that's why you see those greater mythologies about these ancient societies like Atlantis with flying machines and things like that. Now, the reason why I say that is that if we get into end time prophecy and you accept what I was saying about the development of the 7 sacred sciences, is that Jesus said that the end time is going to be like the days of Noah. And I think that includes the Nephilim, and I think that includes both before and after the flood, because Noah lived for 350 years after the flood as well as before the flood. And that if our knowledge is where it is today, and we're not in the end time yet, that means that the antediluvian knowledge was greater than what we have today.
Logic would dictate. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we aren't as advanced as we'd like to think we are. We've only been going at it for 100 or so years in terms of, you know, modern technology, the vehicle, the car, you know, things like the engine and so forth, and where that led to. But it's definitely exponential. The growth is it's doubling each time and quadrupling and 10 timesing itself. And they call it the singularity.
And I think that, and I think the same thing happened in the antediluvian epoch. It may have been as part of our history for a period of time where there wasn't much technology, but as we have experienced, it doesn't take that many centuries to go from no mechanism to flying in space.
It's a very quick decline, isn't it? And most civilizations prosper until they don't, you know, and suddenly just collapse rapidly in their own weight of success usually. And I guess it must be that time again, because it's not as though the intentions are bad with technology, but people don't really understand what they're doing with technology. Like transhumanism, for example, is sold as a good thing to extend life and save lives, you know, and who can argue with that, right? And it's this kind of altruism within everybody is pushing it forward, and they're being played for fools, in my opinion, by Jones, you know.
And not to pardon the pun, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The irony that a clown and a jester and a joker is also a fool, but that's sort of the allegory and the disguise as well. And so people don't misunderstand what you and I are, you know, sort of talking about. I don't think you're against knowledge and technology, and I know I'm not against the sciences. But what we learned is that this knowledge and technology can be used for good, or it can be used for evil. And typically we get both. So it's that application of the knowledge which is always dangerous. And so as we go forward with transhumanism and all these other different technologies that are coming at us, we're going to see the good side of it, because that's what we want to see, and we're going to want to embrace that.
Of course.
But I don't think the world has the wisdom to recognize the downside and then do something about it.
Well, I think what really the problem is the eternal refrain of mankind, and this sin problem we all seem to have, where, you know, if you look back at the atrocities during the 19th and 20th century caused by communism, and the hundreds of millions of tortured, killed, the deaths caused by such things, and then you look at what the Nazis managed to get away with, you realise humans do have a capacity to do terrible things. And I think obviously knowing God is also to know that you could do that too, given the circumstances. To know thyself and know thy own evil, that respect. And most people haven't confronted that aspect and think that no matter what I do, it's good because I believe it's good. And that delusion, I would call it, that ignorance, naivety, is kind of what's destroying us. And they say we're more advanced than ever, but emotionally speaking, I think we're still teenagers essentially as a race. We had to start again since the flood. Exactly.
I think it's a deception and a delusion to think that we're smarter than our ancestors were. Our technology is more advanced, but we're the same individuals. We think the same way. We make the same mistakes. Mm-hmm. And that's why nothing is new under the sun. And that's why the end time is going to be like the first apocalypse.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Well, it's kind of from start to finish. The beginning is the end, isn't it? It's kind of an interesting full circle, and that's the beauty of God, I suppose. Now, summing up here, we've got 10 minutes left, 9 minutes left. I want to round this up at 2 hours, Gary. There was a few topics I wanted to quickly skim over just to see what you think. The Great Wall of China, was it built to keep giants out, do you think?
I don't think it's large enough to do that. It's certainly a possibility. And I don't think there's any significant evidence that I've come across to support that it was built for giants. What we do know, though, is that many of the Scythians, which are deeply connected to the Tuatha De Danann, as we talked about earlier, and Gog and Magog, which comes out of Greek mythology and out of the Bible as names of giants. These are people that migrated. Not only did they go to Ireland and into Germany and into Sweden, but they also went into Russia. Mm-hmm. And of course, the Scythians are the serpent people, and they're also known as the Sarmatians, and also connected with the Amazon women, and they're all part of this sort of group, and their belief system takes them back to certain giants who escaped out of Tartarus. And if people aren't familiar with what Tartarus is, it's kind of a name for an abyss or a prison that the rebellious titans of Greek mythology were locked into after that giant rebellion was put down by the gods. Mm-hmm. And so these are the ones that escaped after the flood. And they come from giants named Scythes and Keltes and Gelates and a few other names that are all related to Galatians and Gauls and Celts and Tuatha De Danann. And they migrate heavily into Russia as well. And in the end time, we have the Gog-Magog War. And then at the 1,000 years, Gog and Magog also rise again. And again, Gog and Magog are also giants that are part of the old Britain history with Albion, Gog and Magog, and of course the Trojans and the Scythians and the Sarmatians migrating over from the Troy area. So is it possible? I'm just laying down how it could be possible that descendants of giants were roaming there, because it was in the far reaches of civilization. And the Chinese civilization, which we know is quite well established to a great age, needed to protect themselves, even as past 1000 CE or AD. And so this wall gets built for protection. But I've done some research. I just can't officially connect it to protect them from walls. I know that's a long sort of explanation, but I wanted to give why I was digging into it.
No, that's true. I figured if anyone would know, Gary, it would be you. So I just threw that out there. That's great answer. And another thing as well I wanted to know about is the monolithic temples of the past. What were they for? These huge structures which can't possibly have been built by us, because the stones themselves are just unfathomably heavy and large. What were they for? What was the purpose to put so much effort into building these huge, beautifully intricate, massive buildings on ley lines? What was the point at the time?
Right. So in the antediluvian world, you have a time before the creation of the people of day 6. And I also will distinguish day 6 people from the Eden account. And if people want some detail on that, just get a hold of me and I'll email you the documents on the differences between Eden and day 6. And what was going on before the creation of humans is that these great cities were being established according to polytheist religion, history, and mythology. So the great cities, let's say, of Sumeria are as much as 10,000 years CE old. Mm-hmm. And so humans would have inherited these cities. And when humans get formed, created, they are rounded up by the Watchers or the Seraphim angels who governed over the many civilizations of the antediluvian world, not just Sumeria, or in the biblical narrative seems to be closely associated with Sumerian civilization, but there's also Atlantis and there's Mu and Asgard. There's as many as 9. Most people say 4, some people say 7, but as many as 9 antediluvian civilizations that are ruled over by these Watchers. Mm-hmm. And the nomads, the wanderers, are gathered in and given food and educated to a certain degree to build more of the cities under their instruction, and also developing the sciences to do it on their own to honor the gods.
Right.
So these great megalithic structures, and I don't care whether you're talking about Machu Picchu or Stonehenge or these great underwater cities, pyramids, there's so many different forms of these great structures that are all around the world, were there to honor and worship the pantheon of gods in those different civilizations. So this is all part of what I was talking about before, was that science was developed to lead people away from God, not to honor God, not to give him credit for anything, and to build monuments to their pantheon of gods and to honor their gods, just as Nimrod was doing at Babel.
Right, so basically they're there to distract the people into worshipping the wrong gods.
Yes.
To not worship God. If you're going to do that, then I guess you would make the most beautiful looking structures you possibly could to get people's eyes to look that direction, wouldn't you? It would make sense. Yeah. Right, brilliant answer again. Thank you. And finally, very quickly on this one, dinosaurs. Where would you fit this into the whole narrative?
Well, you could place them in 2 different locations. One is somewhere between day 6 and the creation of Adam and Eve after day 7. And there's a gap there. Or you could also place them before Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. And to me, it doesn't really matter. But if somebody wants to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me through my website, genesis6conspiracy.com, and send me an email, and I'll email you this information. You can translate Genesis 1:1 to 1:2 in 2 different ways. One, as the standard dogma is, or that the earth became void and was destroyed beforehand. And way too much to go into today, because that's like a show in itself. But that's called the gap theory, or the renewal of the earth theory. Just as the Spirit renews the earth in Genesis 1:2, and also in Psalms 104:30, where the Spirit is sent and the earth is renewed. And again, I'll give you people both ways of translating Genesis. So to me, it fits better in between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. That's where the dinosaurs would have ruled, because you have this angelic rebellion. And because of that angelic rebellion, you have the destruction of the earth. This isn't constitutive for me, but it just seems to fit in there better, and it could fit in afterwards as well. I just find it fits for me better in that sort of gap. These dinosaurs are saurian beings or reptilian beings. This would be a favored species of reptilian, seraphim, viper, dragon, seraphim angels, right? So to me, it makes sense that they created these giant animals, kind of like their preferred reptilian image, just as Nephilim became reptilian offspring to usurp the world away from Adam's descendants.
Interesting. I've not heard that perspective before.
And the term dinosaur is only a couple hundred years old. It was invented by the people out of the Royal Society who we talked about before, being formed by the Rosicrucians and Freemasons to create science and to develop, to lead people away from God. They were known as dragons before that.
Dragons, of course. Right. Well, and speaking of dragons, they don't go that far back in history. They've been around quite a lot recently than before the flood as well.
Yeah.
And I've heard one theory as well that dinosaurs weren't necessarily as carnivorous and as vicious back then until there was a corruption made of all life on Earth. And that's where maybe we get things like velociraptors and T-Rexes, which seem to be deformed more than fully formed animals with small arms, but huge teeth and big mouths, you know. So
and we have no idea when or how that might have went wrong in prehistory. But it just seems to me that the dinosaurs are related somehow to the seraphim angels, and in the age where they ruled and then rebelled.
Yeah, I guess it would make sense that they would make pets for themselves after their own liking in some respects. If they were creator gods themselves, then that would make perfect sense. Fascinating, Gary. Right, well, we've come up to the 2-hour mark now. Thanks for talking. It's been great, and I hope to do it again sometime. Before we just sum up here, how do people listening contact you and find out more about your work? What's the contact details?
So, you can get a hold of me through my website, www.genesis6conspiracy.com. That's Genesis 6 with the number 6 conspiracy.com. I have an email contact there. You can also look on my website for other interviews to get a better flavor for me. And if you're interested in the book, I have a generous excerpt on all 98 chapters on that website to give you a feel for whether or not that would be a book for you or not. And there's a lot of information in there. You can also follow me on Facebook under Gary Wayne. I also have 2 Facebook pages called Genesis 6 Conspiracy that I post on all regularly, and I'm also linked with the Giantology page as well. And you can also follow me on Twitter at GaryWayne63, at GaryWayne63. And if you get a hold of me with a question, I will definitely get back to you, and on most comments I'll get back to you. Do not forward me videos and things like that, because I probably get 15 videos a day to try and review, and I can't keep up to those.
All right, fantastic, Gary. Thanks again for this. I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking time out of your afternoon. And for me, it's 10 o'clock in the evening, so it's bedtime for me. But you enjoy the rest of your day, Gary. Okay, thank you again for this.
And you have a good night. Thank you.
No problem. Bye now.
Put your hands together one time. I want you to get together. I want you to get together.